Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to do with you guys. I think one that a lot of people are itching to, hear lots of different opinions on. Absolutely. This is the brand new Zero Tolerance 0357. This particular one, the black wash or BW variant. You can see right there, there is of course a stonewashed one as well. Very interesting knife. This knife was sent to me for review by Scott Whittington from USA Made Blade, as you can see in the background. USA Made Blade is a retailer that I have been doing a lot of business with for a long time, even well before I got the channel going. You can see there, usamadeblade.com. I will include links for both versions of this knife right down at the top of my description. I know I'm always pointing you guys towards my own links. For today, it's like I said when I unboxed this, let's focus on USA Made Blade. Check them out. They have as you could guess, an enormous amount of USA Made blades, including, stuff that I really enjoy like ZT knives and Hinderer knives, and they ship super fast. Oh my gosh. If you guys get annoyed with online retailers because they're like, we got your order, and then they ship it like 4 days later, seriously, USA Made Blade ships super fast, and I always appreciate that. Scott's been great for to this channel. He's always been nice about sending me stuff for review, so I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. The 0357 or the 357 coming in at 7 3/4 inches overall. Blade length coming in at about, should we call it 3.4? 3.3, 3.4. Actual cutting edge, also 3.3. Okay. Good lines there. I would call this right about at a full-size knife. Just right there. If 8 inches is my full-size marker, it's just right there, just shy of 8 inches. Let's do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1's coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. I think this is a good size comparison, and it's also a good comparison in general because I want to point this out right off the bat. We're looking at, number one, a knife that is close in size, not exactly the same. There are obviously some differences here, but they're close in size, right? But they are identical in terms of materials, okay? G10 and M390 on the Ritter Hogue. We've got G10 and 20 CV on this ZT. They're both made in the United States. They both have steel liners. There's differences in the blade grinds. There's differences in how they texture the handles, the locks, right? But we're looking at two knives that are using the exact same materials that are both in the United States and are very similar prices. I want you guys to keep that in mind because nobody ever says anything bad about the Ritter Hogue. I promise to give my honest thoughts, but I want you to keep that in mind when we're talking about this. Next up, let's talk about the action. This is an assisted knife. That drove a lot of people crazy. When I opened this up, I was like, oh, wow, the action is so snappy. And then I pushed it back down. I thought, oh, it's assisted. And then I felt right here and I thought, now wait, is there a detent ball? Yeah. Is there a detent hole? Yeah. Maybe they can be de-assisted. I had a ton of people tell me immediately no. Scott Whittington actually, in his overview of the knife and his when he was discussing it, he said they have basically no detent. They cannot be, effectively de-assisted. So that is unfortunate. I know a lot of people with knives, between ZT and Kershaw, a lot of people are like, I don't really want the assisted thing, so I'm going to de-assist it. And it is possible on a lot of models. It's apparently not on this guy. That being said, if you're not somebody who cares, right, and the assisted feature is just the assisted feature, then there you go. You have a knife that kind of comes out for you, and you can still put it away, right, like this. So I know that probably the vast majority of my my audience that interacts with this channel on a daily basis, I know you guys probably don't prefer assisted knives, and frankly, I don't either. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not for everybody. There are plenty of people out there who enjoy assisted knives. My wife actually does because she doesn't want to mess around with the knife not deploying, right? Some people who carry a pocket knife and don't fidget with them all the time and they just want them to get out, they just want it to deploy so they can use it right off the bat, they might appreciate an assisted feature. So we're all different. We all have different preferences. Let's talk about carry profile. So This guy is nice and sleek and slim in terms of thickness. You're actually looking at just slightly thinner than the Spyderco Para 3 in terms of carry profile, even considering, or I'm sorry, height, even considering this guy has a flipper tab, it still takes up about the same amount of room in the pocket, honestly, as the Spyderco Para 3 in terms of length, but not height. And then it's way easier to carry all the way around than the Spyderco PM2. Let's talk about weight on this guy. Materials, we're looking at G10, we're looking at full steel liners, and we're looking at CPM 20 CV, 3.3 or so inches of it in a blade stock thickness of, gosh, I love these calipers, 120 thousandths, so not super duper thick. It is not something that's got, show you guys, can we see in there? Oh yeah, it does have a little bit of milling. I missed that the first time. Little teeny, is that even milling? No, that's the relief cut. Okay, so if you count the relief cut as milling, that oval, they don't normally look like that, but if you count that as milling, then yeah, it's got a little bit in there. It doesn't feel like, I'm going to make a guess. And no, I haven't read the specs. You can believe me if you want. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pick up the Ritter Hogue. I'm going to guess this weighs 4 ounces. Okay, metal complex is close. Why am I speaking to myself in the third person? 4.3 ounces. That's kind of what I expected. You go by ounce and inch, you're going to call that heavy. Or you're going to call that not, you know, economic. Not efficient, right? If you're the type of person that's anything over 4 ounces is heavy, I guess it's going to be heavy. If you're like me and you consider carry profile first, it's not going to be heavy. It's not a problem at all. I think for the widest range of people, the average person who carries a knife, this is going to feel right at home in your pocket. It has a very, I mean, just all the way around. Blade length, handle length, thickness, height, the curvature of the knife in your pocket, right? It's going to feel very welcome. If you walk around in athletic shorts all day or skinny jeans, it might be a little bit much for you, but you probably could still do it. If you carry other things in your pocket, I don't think this knife's going to bother those things, or those things are going to bother this knife more than your average pocket knife. I think it simply is good. So I don't have a problem with that. Let's do the hardwood check, because that's the thing I always forget about. Get out my handy dandy WIA bit selector and WIA magnetic driver, 2 items that are very inexpensive and very recommendable. And you can actually find those down in my Amazon store. If you want to pull that link up that I talked about at the beginning of the video, and you open it up and you go down and you look at knife maintenance, you can find those in there. I'm going to guess that the pivot is T8 and that the body screws are T6. Go ahead and check that there real quick. Just give her a little tiny bit of a... Yeah, that's T8. And those body screws, unfortunately, I think are probably T6. Let's look here real quick. Yeah, those are T6. Okay, well, that's pretty typical Kershaw. It's been more typical of ZT lately, but it's pretty typical. Not that big of a deal. It's a bother. You guys have heard me say it a million times. I just don't like it because the bits can strip a little easier than T8, but it is what it is. What's interesting is that they seem to go all the way through and thread into cylindrical, I don't know what you'd call those. They're just threaded cylinders. Perhaps they go all the way through. I don't know. I think that's nice in terms of strength because, think about all the extra threads you're getting in there, right? Whereas in a design where they thread into the backspacer or into the standoffs like this, you might only be getting 2, 3, maybe 4 threads, which honestly is plenty strong. In this, if they go all the way through, I'd say they're at least getting 5 threads, maybe more than that. I think that's pretty trivial. That's just the design that they chose. It's probably not, the amount of increased strength that you might get from this is trivial, or it might be exactly the same. It is what it is. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy of this knife. I think we talked about everything, right? leading up to that. So we're looking at G10 that's actually got a bunch of different things going on here. We've got some chamfering down here, a little bit different, smoother pattern. Then we've got some, it's not really, it's like the lightest peel ply texturing you could imagine. It is not, this is not the same type of peel ply texturing. Like it's, I mean, even on the Para 3, I wouldn't call this aggressive, but this is way less aggressive than this. And that means that in and out of the pants is going to be super easy, but at the same time, it still offers, oddly enough, a little bit of traction. It's mainly the lines of the knife that make it easy to hold on to. But yeah, there's a little tiny bit of traction there. It is appealing. I wouldn't call it contoured, but it gives this false impression of contouring because of the, you know, how far back here they start this chamfering. And it is comfortable in hand. I don't have a problem with that at all. Let's go ahead and talk about the blade steel. So we're looking at CPM 20 CV, which I think everybody knows by now is Crucible's version of M390, or Crucible's version of a Carpenter CTS 204P. It's all the same composition, and that's great. I think that this is a blade that is ground for to accentuate the properties of 20 CV, which is high edge retention, and then of course high corrosion resistance. This is definitely an EDC style knife, not one that I'd consider a hard use knife. So I think it makes really, really good use of those properties, and I like that. This knife, something that you'll hear everywhere, like literally just look right down in my comment section. This knife looks exactly like the ZT0095. This knife looks exactly like the Kershaw Link. This knife looks like the Natrix. It looks like a lot of different ZT and Kershaw knives. And the reason is because the blade and handle, you know, that it kind of works. They kind of took blade. To me, it's like they took the handle of the Link, and then they put G10 on it. And then they took the blade from the 0095 and then they shrunk it down a little bit and they made it assisted. I mean, yeah, they did. They borrowed features from their own designs. Unless you want to talk about the controversy in the Natrix. But to me, that's what it looks like. It looks like a Link and it looks like an 0095 mixed together. Is that a problem? I don't think so. I'm not really sure why people think that's a problem. A lot of people like those models, and you know, the 0095 that this most closely resembles is much more expensive, and I believe actually discontinued now. So it's interesting. I don't know if it was necessarily something that people were like, you know, breaking down ZT's doors for, but it's interesting, and that's really all the more that it is. I think oftentimes people hear the same thing over and over and over again in the light of a complaint, and then they automatically assume that it is a valid complaint. It's simply something that people are yelling. I'm not really sure that it's a valid complaint. It is something that's happening, and people seem to be yelling at it a lot. This looks like this. There's a lot of stuff that looks like a lot of stuff. That's how it is. I don't think it's a problem. I think the blade is ground incredibly well. It is super thin down here. You can see we've got this swedge that runs out about 55–60%. Comes down to a very nice, very thin tip. Don't do any prying with this, but you know, if you're going to do your normal stuff like puncturing, you know, into the side of a box and cutting or whatever, yeah, it's going to be plenty fine. Blade shapes like this tend to do pretty well. There's a nice area back here to rest your thumb. There's some meaningful real jimping back there. There's plenty of belly. This is going to be an excellent slicer. Absolutely. The assisted thing, you know, we already kind of talked about that. Moving down to the rest of the handle skills. Actually, we should talk about the flipper tab. I think the flipper tab is shaped really, really well. It's a little less important, but what I do appreciate that they did is they didn't make the flipper tab so prominent. I mean, it would be, if they made it more prominent, it would be unnecessary. They give you a little bit of jimping right there, and it catches your finger a little bit. Under consistent hard use or heavy cuts, you know, for a long period of time, that might start to bother your finger a little bit, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. Flipper tab doesn't stick out very far, and it doesn't need very much pressure to get it to deploy, and it's pretty easy to disengage, and I would call it safe. You start to feel the resistance of the blade well before it gets to your thumb, so that's plenty good. It's also going to deploy. I mean, the assisted feature on a ZT knife or a Kershaw knife is always pretty dependable, so that's nice. This has an enormous amount of shouldering. Can you see that right there, that line? It's actually the back of the blade. That's how much of the blade hooks into that stop pin in there. So there's a lot of shouldering, and that's nice. We have a steel lock bar, so the steel on steel interaction already is going to decrease lock bar wear over time, and that enormous amount of shouldering is going to ensure a lot of surface contact all the way around that stop pin. So that's nice. I appreciate that. Also, the landing zone back here is nice. There's no jimping, so you can flip this all day. And it does have a certain amount of fidget factor to it. Assisted knives do. You know, they kind of thwack hard. You know, so if you're somebody who doesn't mind assisted knives or really likes assisted knives, that might bring you a little bit of enjoyment. We do have a very simple, what I assume is a G10 backspacer back here, but I'm not seeing any real fibers, so I don't know if that actually is the case. It does look different than this area out here, but I'm going to say it's most likely G10. I'm not 100% sure on that. In any case, it is a backspacer doing a backspacer's job. It seems to be fitted well. I don't really have a problem with it. It just is what it is. This pocket clip is one that I honestly like. You have to just kind of give it a little bit of an extra push there. These screws do stick up. Sorry, my jeans are just like falling apart. And that's because the knives that I carry are just slowly consuming them. But anyways, gosh, there's this one little piece of fuzz and I'm just trying to get off there. Anyways, this area up here, the screws stick up just a little bit. If you have super thick pant material, you know, that might bother you a little bit, but I'm wearing regular jeans right now. And despite it wanting to, you know, really, one more time. Despite it really wanting to grab and pull everything away from the incredibly, I wish you could see my jeans right now, that totally frayed area from carrying pocket knives forever. It's really wanting to pull that away from my jeans, but actually getting it up over those screws doesn't really seem to be that much of a problem. I don't notice that much of a difference between that and this area right here on the Ritter Hogue. It just is what it is. It carries nice and deep. The pocket clip has a little bit of a bill. I would have preferred it not stick up that much, but it does, and it really isn't that big of a deal. Something I really appreciate is the fact that we have a typical ZT Kershaw hex rear side of the pivot, meaning it's not going to free spin, and that's nice. I've had a lot of assisted Kershaw knives and a couple of assisted ZT knives in the past, and I've got a blur, my wife has a blur, and it's kind of got the same type of deal. I've never had one of those things come undone. As many times as we've flipped them, I'm sure some people do have them come undone, but you know, assisted knives have the same consistent amount of force every time, and it's kind of in excess because that spring is throwing it out. So you'd think, just based on what I know about manual operating knives, that pivot screw would undo itself over time, and it really doesn't seem to. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Also, this knife locks up very solid, just like every other ZT Kershaw I've ever felt. And then we have, as you can see there, the centering is dead on, and that's nice. 17 minutes in, what do I think of this knife? I think that the fact that it's got T6 screws, well, I always complain about that, so whatever. The fact that it's assisted and cannot be de-assisted, I mean, it probably could, but you wouldn't be working with D10. That's gonna bother a lot of people. In fact, a lot of people, the type of people that ZT has attracted to their knives, it's really weird. It's gonna bother a lot of people. For some people, it's not, and I imagine for a lot more that we don't know about, you know, they might actually enjoy that. It might actually attract people to ZT. And to me, this knife serves as a bridge between Kershaw and ZT. A lot of people who really like Kershaws, maybe because of their assisted feature, and have stayed away from ZT because they either don't like manually operating knives or more likely are shying away because of the prices. This knife serves as this very interesting transitional point, possibly for some people. It's definitely not going to be for everybody, but I can see it being a reasonable option for those people. Now, the other issue is the price, kind of, right? Again, people are like, you know, Kershaw makes this knife in this steel and you can get it. Sometimes. Kershaw makes, you know, versions of knives that are offered in certain steels for a little bit and they take them away. Maybe there are permanent versions of it. You know, I mean, yeah, like, I mean, a fair argument is you can get the bare knuckle in CPM 20 CV for what? $100? That's a great deal, unless you hate how the bare knuckle looks. There are a lot of knives out there that I love the look of that cost a little more money than a knife that I might consider to be the best bang for my buck. And you know what? I go ahead and buy them because that's what I want. And, you know, there's a lot of people I think who are quick to jump on ZT much faster than other companies just because it seems like that's what other people are doing. I had a Knife Guy episode about this. People like to stand back and go, what's everybody else saying? Oh, they don't like that. Well, I'm going to jump in too because it makes me feel like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, mob mentality, right? Now, come on. Come on, guys. G10 20CV, G10 M390. Both of these knives have great handle ergonomics. Both of them have very performance-oriented blades. They arguably take, I mean, this one actually takes up less room in the pocket, and, you know, their weights are similar, right? I think this guy weighs a little bit less. I'm comparing these because this is undeniably a good design, and nobody complains about it. It's US made, and it runs, what, $160? This guy runs, I think, on Scott's website, $148. Yes, you can get USA-made knives that cost less, that look similar, that are offered by, you know, Kershaw, right? You know, but it just depends on where you put the value. You know, some people will pay a little bit more money for a design and an appearance that is exactly what they want. And maybe Kershaw's not offering that exactly. What this comes down to, and I think what a lot of people are forgetting, is this is very functional. The design is very well executed. It is, you know, it's nothing new. We have G10 and steel liners, you know, in a construction being stabilized by the blade and the backspacer, and then we have a very thin, very performance-oriented ground 20 CV sort of modified drop points sheep's foot blade, and it's also running on phosphor bronze. And what that means is, at the end of the day, you're getting a very well-made USA premium cutting tool. That being said, you know, I know people who are still hanging around, Complex, seriously, what do you think about the price? I do think the price is a little bit high, you know, but if I'm going to say that, then I'd have to admit that the price on the Ritter Hogue is a little high. So it kind of makes me question, like, what do I really think? You know, what biases are at play here? I don't know. I think if they had brought this knife out and they had said $135, people would have probably lost their mind over it. People have been like, wow, ZT made a knife for $135? But because it's $15 more, it makes people more upset. And then when you have that, you know, that you got big crowds of people, or it looks like this. It feels like a Kershaw. It's assisted knife, so it feels like a Kershaw. Had it been manual and had they brought it out at $135, I think it would have been an absolute home run for some people, not for everybody, you know. But so can I recommend it? Yeah, guys. Yeah, I mean, I totally can. It's not. I mean, it's a little overpriced. It's not crazy, you know. Yeah, you can get a Kershaw in 20 CV and aluminum made in USA for $100. But if you don't like those models and you like how this one looks, is it worth paying the extra $50 or $48 or whatever? I mean, for some people it won't, but for some people it will. This is still, you know, again, at its base, it's a functional design. I wish it wasn't assisted, but it's a good pocket knife, and it's made in the USA. I honestly don't have a problem with it. So yeah, despite those things, I am still going to say, you know, I'm going to go ahead and recommend it. It's probably not something that I would pick up for myself, but I don't think it's as outlandish as people are saying. You know, I honestly do like this. I can see what ZT's trying to do with it, and maybe ZT will kind of back off the price a little bit, but those are my honest thoughts. I think this is pretty cool. Guys, I think that's about all I can say about this knife. If you enjoyed this review/overview, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.